All right, hello everybody. This is a video lesson where I'm going to go through assignment 2 and just try to give you more information on reading music notation. So I'm on the Blackboard website and I'm going to click what I see is the assignment. I can click down so I can read everything. Now, the way this is, I realize the way it's laid out is kind of awkward and it's not how I loaded it in there. So I made another PDF of it and I put it in the the attached file. So down here you can click on that and get an easier version to read. So I'm going to read off this one. I'm going to go through the assignment and kind of walk you through some of the links and talk about what music notation, reading the basics of music notation. So when you get your assignment, read through all this text. I'm not going to read this whole thing out loud. You guys can read all that, but I'm going to go into the section where we talk about how to read notes and rhythms and things, or at least identifying them, whether you can play an instrument or not. So this is a great website, musictheory.net. I'm going to copy and paste it so I don't lose this page. And there's all kinds of stuff out there these days, of course. This is just one of the ones that I like. I don't know why I went there. And it's got a lot of stuff in this website. It's primarily for people who already can play music, but there's lessons, and these are the links that I created from the assignment to go to this section. So I'm going to click out of that. And so this is a great web resource here. So study the website links below in order to understand the assignment. Okay. Yeah, so do this first and then I'll show you the assignments. What pitches or notes, music notation tells us two basic things. It tells us what pitches or notes to sing or play on an instrument, or as well as when and how long to sing or play the instruments. So it tells you what to play and when to play it, or how long to play it or sing it. And it's a pretty amazing system. It really is. Let's see, is that going to work? Oh, that'll work. We can just go back. Okay, so I'm just going to click on the link again. So click on this link, the staff, clefs, and ledger lines. This is how we determine what pitches to play. And so this is our system here. On a side note, if you can already read music or have some other basic understanding of it, and this isn't new information for you, then I encourage you to just listen to how I teach it. Maybe it'll give you some new ideas or new ways of looking at music. Okay, so this is our staff. This is our template of music notation. And it's derived of lines and spaces. As you can see down here in this, it says the staff is the foundation upon which notes are drawn. So it's like the graph paper that we put our notes on. And then if I push the down arrow or click on the next line, it starts to interact. So so we just click on each one of these sentences. The modern staff comprises 5 lines and 4 spaces. And so this is what I really make sure students understand, is that they can differentiate between reading the lines. Where are the lines? There's 5 lines and there's 4 spaces. But each space is between the lines. And there's actually a song that I do with elementary students that sounds like this. The staff has 5. It has 5 lines. E G B D F. E G B D F. In between those lines there lies a space. F-A-C-E. It spells the word face. So I jumped ahead a little bit, but I thought I would just show you that song. And that helps the kids remember the note names on the lines and the spaces, which I'll get to soon. Okay, clicking again. Every line or space on the staff represents a white key on the keyboard. I'm going to click on that. So if you look at that, every line and space represents a note on the keyboard. Oh, incidentally, you can also just push play and it'll just walk you through it. But I'm going to pause on each one. So let me go back to this. All right, so there's our keyboard. And the piano is actually pretty basic. Anybody can probably be able to figure out the note names on a keyboard once they're taught how to do it, it's literally black and white. And if you notice on the keyboard, we have sets of 2 and sets of 3, and every one of those has the same name. It just has a higher or lower sound. And on the white, so the patterns are very consistent. It just repeats itself. The patterns visually repeat themselves. Okay, so on the staff, so every note, every circle, if you will, that's drawn on a line or space corresponds with a pitch. And it doesn't just have to be the piano keyboard. It can be any instrument, but we're doing it on the keyboard. Okay, now this is clefs. There's 2 basic kinds of clefs. So in other words, this is the symbol at the front of the music that it's like if one is French and one is German. If you have the first clef, which is the one on the left here, the treble clef, the notes are going to be arranged a certain way on the lines or spaces that would be different from the other one, which is called the bass clef. And so you got to make sure that you know what clef you're in first. It's not really that complicated. Like most instruments read treble clef. Those are the instruments that play the higher notes, and the bass clef over here is for the bass instruments. So the lower notes, like the bass guitar or the cello or the trombone, the tuba, they would read bass clef, and treble clef would be flute, violin, clarinet, saxophone, trumpet. And a piano actually reads both at the same time, which we'll get to. So the 2 clefs are normally called treble clef and bass clef. I'm not going to spend a whole lot. Well, it's important to know that. It's important to know because your assignments will want you to be able to tell the difference between treble clef and bass clef. So this is important. And all music has either a treble clef sign or a bass clef sign in front of it first, and then you know how to find the notes out from there. And there's lots of systems and ways to do it. There's other clefs as well. There's an alto clef and a tenor clef, but they're not as common. Okay, so first we'll discuss the treble clef. Another word for it is the G clef, and the reason why is because where the clef kind of loops around this line, the second line, that note is G. So the text says the staff line which the clef wraps around, shown in red, is known as G. Any note placed on this line becomes G. And then, if I go to the next one, the note on the space above G is A. Remember, there is not an H. So let me pause here for a second. The musical alphabet is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then it just repeats again. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's it. So actually, here's something kind of handy. This is a pop-up piano. I just clicked over here. So if I wanted to play, there's a G. That's another G. Here's an A. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then it starts over. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and so on. Okay. And yeah, you can play around with that pop-up piano. It's kind of neat. All right, and so as we go up the staff, we just follow the musical alphabet. So it's going to go line, space, line. The G's in the line, the A's in the space, the B's in the line, and it just follows the alphabet naturally. The process just goes up. And as you can see at the end, we have another G. It starts over. So after F, there's G, and then then it starts over to A again. And it can keep going, just like notes on a ruler or math fractions, or and so we ran out of places to put notes. What happens now? Because there's more notes that can keep going higher. You just start drawing in the lines, which we call ledger lines, and for when there's times there's notes higher, ledger lines are drawn in. So there's an A, and I go to my handy dandy pop-up piano. That's that top A right there, this one, A. Here's another A. See how it's the same relationship to the black and white keys? 3, 3, it's right here, right here. Those are all the same note. Okay. But like this A is higher than this A, and this A is lower than this A. Good. All right, and now let's discuss bass clef. All the rules are the same. It's just that now the notes start on different lines or spaces. So the bass clef is also called the F clef, and that's because this line that's between the two dots is F. So you do have to memorize that. Like if I go back here, you do have to memorize at least one note as your reference note, and then understand the concept of going up from there. So there's some memorization involved for sure. Okay, ledger lines. Go back to bass clef. All right, so here's our F clef, and then the same rule applies like the treble clef. We can now fill in the rest of the notes. Okay, so if we go up the staff, we go up the alphabet, F, G, A. If we go down from the F, then the alphabet goes backwards. Down means lower in sound, F, E, D, C, B, A, G. So as you can see, they're in different lines and spaces than treble clef, and there's a reason for that. It's not just random. So the lower notes would be down here. So there's my F. I go F, and then F, G, A, and then here's the red F again. F, I go backwards, E, and I'm running out of piano. Usually the piano's longer, but it can keep going down. I don't think I can change the octave on this. I think it has to stay like that. Okay, so but that's bass clef, and then we discussed the grand staff. The grand staff is a theoretical staff consisting of 11 lines. Watch what happens when we eliminate the middle line. We end up with 2 regular staffs. So we took the middle line out just visually because, man, all those lines is really hard to read. So the system kind of changed, and now you take the middle line out, and then if you need that note, you add a ledger line. So now we have treble clef and bass clef. So a piano player would see both of these at the same time. And then we just put a ledger line in the middle. And that note happens to be C. And that's a really important note. If you might have heard the term middle C, that's our middle C. It's in the middle of both staffs. It's in between the higher note staff and the lower note staff. The C is commonly called the middle C since it corresponds to the middle C in to the middle staff line on grand staff. All right, so that's a basic run through of the staff, clefs, and ledger lines, and you can always rewind this video and watch the part again. Now I'm going to go to the next link in my assignments. Oh, did I lose my... Oh, nope. I'll just go back here again. I think I messed this. There we go. Get that back. I like this version better. Okay, now steps and accidentals. And I'll just put it in this window. Whoops. I hope that has the link on it. Okay. Steps and accidentals. Yeah, so it looks like the link is there. You just got to make sure to either copy and paste it or click on it. Oh, I remember what I did now. That. Okay. All right, so here is this is what we call steps and accidentals, and this is going to be basically talking about the black keys. So we had the white keys earlier. Here's the black keys. So here's some terminology. Steps in music refer to the distance between two pitches. You can have a half step, a whole step, a step and a half, but the word step has to do with the distance between 2 different notes, or 2 different pitch sounds, a high note and a low note. You can have 3.5 steps, you can have 5 steps, 8 steps, a half of a step. So a half step or a semitone is the distance from one key on the keyboard to the next adjacent key. So the distance between like a white key and a black key would be a half step, for instance, or any notes that are basically touching each other on the keyboard. The distance between those 2 notes is a half step. Okay, key 1 to key 2 is a half step since they are next to each other. That's the closest you can get. Well, you can get, people argue you can do quarter steps, but on a piano you cannot get any closer than that. A half step is not always from a white key to a black key. it can also, for example, key 1 and key 2 are still next to each other, this 1 and 2. They're touching each other, so they're a half step apart. So that's half step. A whole step is simply, or a whole tone, or simply tone, is the same distance as 2 half steps. Key 1 and key 3 is a whole step. Key 1 to key 3 is a whole step. So when you skip a note, that's called a whole step. Key 1 to key 2 is the first half step. Key 2 to key 3 is the second half step. Okay, so those are our steps, whole steps and half steps. An accidental is a line used to raise or lower the pitch of a note. So these are the symbols for the black keys. And we have the flat note and the sharp, the flat sign and the sharp sign. So this is not a hashtag. It's not a number sign in music. It's called for sharp. So the flat note usually refers to notes going lower in pitch. Sharp refers to notes going higher in pitch. And the word for that is accidentals. So when we put one of these symbols in front of a letter name or a note, if we were to isolate this, these are called accidentals. Not super important for now, but just so that you have an idea. The first accidentals that we will discuss are the flat and sharp. The flat lowers a note by a half step, while the sharp raises a note by a half step. Only a half step. When typing, you can use the number to represent sharp and a lowercase b to represent flat. Let's examine the black key in between C and D. So that note is called, it's between the notes C and D, which just take my word for it. We haven't really explained why. And so this is what it would look like on our staff. This key would be called C sharp since it is a half step above C. We call that C sharp. But here's the tricky part. It can also have a different name. Same sound, same everything. Or we can call it D flat. It could also be called D flat since it's a half step below D. Now this has to do with the song that it's in. And that's more complicated than I want to get into right now. But it can have two names depending on its reference note. So if we're talking about going from C up to C sharp, we call it a C sharp. If we're calling D flat or D down to D flat, we call it a D flat. And then, again, this is just an introduction. Another example would be E to F. E and F are the two white keys that are right next to each other, E and F. And E would also be called F flat since it's a half step below F. So that's kind of confusing right now, but so I'm going to just kind of skip over that for now. Likewise, F could be called E sharp. Okay, and that's because there's no black key between this note and this note, and these are E and F. So that's an E, or otherwise known as F flat. This is a F, otherwise known as E sharp. Kind of complicated, so we'll leave that one on the back burner. Whenever a certain pitch has multiple names, it's called an enharmonic spelling. So that's a fancy word for, hey, this note can be either called C sharp or D flat. It's the same note, but it's enharmonic. It has two names to it. Now let's discuss double flats and double sharps. And again, guys, this is just an introduction so that, there's just some terminology that if you've never heard of it before, now you have. Don't let it overwhelm you. Just let it enrich you. Next, let's discuss the double flat and the double sharp. And when flats and sharps alter by a half step, the double flat and the double sharp alter a note by a whole step. So in other words, every time you have one of these little symbols like a flat sign, they count as a half step. So if you have two of them, they count as two half steps. Two halves make a whole. So, and I know it's confusing, but if you get deeper into composition and music theory and kind of the nuts and bolts, it does make sense why these different terminologies exist. It definitely has to do with a composer's point of view. Okay, and so these are just some different symbols that musicians have to learn. I would say that they don't even really show up for students in regular public school, generally speaking, until high school is when you'll start seeing double flats and double sharps and that kind of thing. Middle school kids will see flat and sharp signs. Some elementary school kids will. And of course, little kids are taking piano or that kind of stuff. They'll start to see these sooner. When typing, you can use X to represent a double sharp or two lowercase b flats to represent a flat. Okay, so for example, both D and E double flat have the same pitch since you can reach D by going a whole step or two halves down to E. That's quite a mouthful. So yeah, that's just something to be aware of. It's not going to really matter that much to you as far as your grade goes in this class. And there's this. Look at that. That's the same note. So it can be this. This symbol can be the same key on the piano as this one. But why would you care about that? You wouldn't unless you were playing at a more intermediate to advanced level. Finally, a natural conceals of any accidental and returns to a note of its original white key. So in other words, when you this is a sign. This natural sign is kind of a it's not really redundant, but in a way it is. It's basically saying, hey, it's not sharp, it's not flat, it's not double sharp, it's not double flat, relax. It's just a regular good old C or regular A, right on the white keys of the piano. So if you see this natural sign, it doesn't change the note like a sharp or a flat would. It's just kind of a reminder sometimes. And okay, and so that's steps and accidentals. Oops. Sorry. Okay. And okay, and now note and identification exercise. Let me go back to this again. Okay. This one right here, I'm just going to explain this to you. And so this is going to be an exercise you're going to do as an assignment, and the links are down here. So let me give you an example. Now, I know you don't, I haven't officially taught you where these notes are yet on the keyboard or on the staff. I'm going to get to that later. I'm just exposing that this is going to be an assignment that you're going to need to know, so you want to pay attention for the rest of this video. So I see this is an exercise that you can do on this website. So I know that note is F, so I click F. Okay. I know that note is a B sharp, so I'm going to click B sharp. I know this is an F, and that is a G, and I could go on and on and on. But the point is, if you look up here, this exercise has 10 categories or 10 problems in it. Let's say, okay, this is a D sharp. I'm going to do it wrong. Okay, now it just goes, it says, hey, that's wrong. But it gives me another chance. D, okay, it's a D sharp. Okay, now there's my grade. I have a 67. Okay, no, that's a D. And that's a D sharp. But I'm going to make it wrong. I'm going to say it's a D flat. Oops. Oh, well. Okay, maybe I can get it right. D sharp. And it just keeps going and going. So it's a good exercise. We'll get to that later. You're going to have a bunch of those. All right. Okay, so now click on the knee. This is. I'll come back to this actually. Let me think about this for a second. Well, let me just go through them. Okay, so now this has to do with. Let me go back. Sorry. So we just talked about what notation tells us as far as how to find the notes on the staff and the steps and accidentals. Now, if you're doing this note identification exercise, go and you have no other resource, go back to that first link and go back through this little description here, and then you'll start to find, oh, okay, wait, there's my G clef, there's my G, and if I know if that's G, here's A, and I can just keep counting up. That's the idea here. So then if I go back to, so here's all my notes, right? Or if I need to go lower, I just count backwards from G to find another note. So if I go back to these exercises, and I would, this is a practice, this one's a practice here, then if I look here, okay, I remember that G is on this second line, so if I go down under G, G is F, or under G is F, before G is F. So that's an F, and that's a flat sign, so that would be F flat. Okay, now here's my G clef, and this is right on the G line, so that, and there's a flat sign in front of it, so that's G flat. And here, if I know that the second line is G, and I go backwards down my alphabet, before G is F, that's that space, and then before that is E. So here's an E, and there's a sharp sign in front of it, so this is an E sharp. Okay, there's another F flat, we just had that earlier. So this is how you would do, whoops, this is how you do this assignment. Okay, and here's a ledger line way up here. So now I have to remember, okay, there's G, and you know, honestly, guys, it's okay to do this. You could just do something like this: treble, clef, staff, notes, for instance. So see if that finds something, and you could just boom, find a guide, a quote unquote cheat sheet, and use it. This is not a test. This is just for you to get familiar with all this stuff. Okay, so you can use these as a guide. It's just a matter of getting inside of this and doing it, so you get a deeper understanding of finding your notes on your staff. Okay, and so that's that section. Okay, let me go back here. Okay, so now the other part of reading music is when or how long to sing notes or pitches. Okay, so note duration, that means how long a note lasts. The length of time that a note is played is called note duration, which is determined by the type of note. So these are the different symbols of how long we would hold a note for, how many beats. This symbol says this is our longest symbol that we have. We can do things to it to change it, but we call it a whole note. And this is a half note. So they all have names, and they're based on fractions. The half note is half of the duration of the whole note. And a whole note lasts for 4 beats. The beats can be fast or slow, but if I have like top, that would be a note that I just sang for 4 beats. Or I could sing it slow. It's still going to be 4 beats. Ta. So half of that is 2. So we call that a half note. Ta. That was 2 beats. 2 half notes occupy the same amount of time as 1 whole note. Okay, so ta, ta. That would be 2 half notes. And the quarter note is just keeps cutting in half. The quarter note is a fourth of a quarter, or a quarter of a whole note. So it's a fourth of the whole note. So it's just one. So here's my my beats going by. Ta. I just sang for 4 beats, but I can sing for 1 beat. Ta, 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 ta. So that's just right on the beat. So the beat gets the note. This is a really important note. And so then it breaks down like that. So you can hold a note out for 4 beats. Ta. That was 4. And then here's 2 and 2. Ta, ta. So I did 2 of them in the same amount of time it would take to do that one up above. And on the bottom is the same amount of time as you can have a whole note going. You can do 4 notes inside of that. Ta, 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 ta. And that kind of stuff happens in symphonic music all the time. And now we start cutting things in half. Notes smaller in duration than quarter notes have flags. Each flag halves the value of the note. So now this lasts for half as long. And in elementary music, we call those TT. TT, TT. So, and they're eighth notes, and so they sound like T, 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 T. So every beat that goes by, you can say or play 2 beats. So they go twice as fast. So T, 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 T. 2 of those last as long as a quarter note. Ta, T, T. Same amount of time, but the second one had 2 notes inside of that time, whereas the first one just had 1 note inside of that time. And you can just keep cutting these in half. 16th notes, 2 16th notes, or a 16th note is 2 flags having the value again. And so you in the amount of time it takes to do a quarter note, ta, ta, you can do 4 16th notes. And we say tiki, 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 tiki. Okay, so that's fast. So that's when you start hearing notes are being played quickly on an instrument, especially. So 4 16th notes occupy the same amount of time as a quarter note. And this is what's incredible, is that we are visually representing something that is invisible. Sound is invisible. Yet people have figured out how to write it down on paper, basically, and this, and you can see what it sounds like if you understand the terminology. It's really amazing. It's like a ruler of time. Like instead of measuring inches or centimeters, the ruler is measuring beats or counts. Okay, although it is possible to have notes with 3 or more flags, they are seldom used. That's just because you just don't need to get going that fast. Meaning that if you're going tiki 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 and it needs to be faster, instead of writing it tiki 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 tiki, you just speed up the pulse of the song. Tiki 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 tiki. So they're totally legit and usable. They're just not as common. It just gets, you get 30-second notes and 64th notes. Crazy fast. So there's a breakdown of the most common rhythms and how they relate to each other. So that's what musicians and music teachers think about kind of in their mind's eye. All right, and so that's how long, that's our system of note duration, how long a note goes. If you have one of these, if a note is drawn in this way, it tells us, it doesn't tell us what pitch to play, it tells us how long to let it last. That's the system. Pretty cool. Okay, back to the assignment. And the next link, measures and time signatures. And this gets on the more complicated side. Okay, so vertical black bars called bar lines divide the staff into measures. The staff is split into 2 measures. So these vertical bar lines are there to just make it easier to visually see and keep track of where you are. And it helps us visually divide things up a little bit more evenly. This is where when people say music is so mathematical, definitely in this system of notation, of writing music down, fractions are used constantly when it comes to how long or when we play notes. And then when we talk about time, that's how we divide up the beats on the music. Just for it could be, music can be written, the same song can be written down a lot of different ways. And so that's why it's important to have different kinds of symbols and terminology. The first measure is in 4/4 time, the second is in 3/4 time. And so that means that in 4/4 time, and that means 4 quarter notes per box, or 4 beats per box. That measure, that box that those quarter notes are in, is called a measure. And so in the time it takes for that measure to go by, there will be 4 beats. Or a song can have 3 beats. So the song is grouped into strong groups of 3 or strong groups of 4. A waltz is in 3/4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So this is a way for the musician to get an easier visual on how the music should be played. If these weren't here, it might be difficult to tell like where beat 1 is or beat 2 is, because there's just be hundreds of notes on the page, and as you're reading along, having a bigger awareness of where the beat is would be much more difficult. But this breaks it down so you can visually see where the strong beats are. And 1 is always the strongest beat. Always, I hate to use that word in music because it's an art form, but that's what our bodies are used to, is feeling that pulse of where we call it the down beat, beginning of the count. Now there's some other ways to do it as well, and this gets more complicated. Next we'll discuss non-quarter note time signatures. So this is just a system, this is where I personally think the system breaks down a little bit, because we have 6 eighth notes in a measure. Wait a second, an eighth to a sixth? That doesn't work. Other countries, they don't call these eighth notes, they call them, I think, semiquavers. I have to research that. But there's other names for these. Our system, we call them eighth notes because if they have a little flag on there, they're eighth notes. But mathematically, that breaks down now. You can't have that. You can't cut that in half as easily. But that's the system we have. And so when you see the music, the first eighth note, we give that beat 1. The second one, we give that beat 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And again, guys, this is just an overview. High school students will see these time signatures. Middle school students won't see them as often. Or you can have the half note get the beat. So the half note, then the 2 stands for a half note. So this is very complicated here. This is where music reading can get really confusing, and so you definitely need to have a good teacher for this. And if you're the student trying to or a student being taught this, if the student's not really paying attention, they're not going to just understand it, because there's too much background information as to why this and why that, and it takes more than one sit down. This is a long process. So that, to get to this level where we're breaking stuff down like this is confusing unless you start out with really little bits and pieces. That's why in the elementary curriculum, kids are not even showed a note on the staff. They're showed a teddy bear, but secretly that teddy bear is going to represent a quarter note some other time. So it's just, if you're taught it correctly over the right amount of time, this will all come together. And again, for you guys, this is just an overview. Okay, so this is just some different types of time signatures. 4/4 and 3/4 are the most common. 6/8 would be the next most, and 3/2 is very uncommon. All right, so that's that little lecture, and then there's there's rest duration. So this is when to not play. This is when to not play. So these are symbols of when to not play, and each type of rest shares a duration with a certain note. So this whole note was 4 beats. This rest is 4 beats. Half note is 4 beats, or we make silence for 4 beats, or quarter note, quarter rest. Don't make any sound for a beat. Eighth, don't make any sound for half a beat. How do you know how long a half a beat goes by? Well, it just takes time. 16th, or don't make any noise for a 16th of a beat. So that's pretty complicated. But a whole note or a half note, or even a quarter note, that's not as complicated for how long to be quiet. But once you start getting into trying to feel a half of a beat, that's quite a challenge. But it shows up in middle school sometimes in their music, so it can be done. For example, both a quarter rest and a quarter note occupy the same amount of time, while the note. No, sorry. For example, both a quarter rest and a quarter note occupy the same amount of time. While the note would make a sound, the rest is silent. So these are the symbols that music readers have to understand what to do when they see them. To demonstrate this, let's fill a measure of 4/4 time with quarter notes. Ta, 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 ta. That's what we're taught. Students are taught that it's going to sound like. Ta, 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 ta. When played, all 4 notes sound. Ta, 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 ta. Next, place a quarter note with a quarter rest. Now it would be ta, ta, ta. Or I'm going to whisper the word rest just so we understand what's going on. Ta, rest. Ta, ta. That's what that would sound like. When played, the second beat is now silent. Okay, and then there's other kinds of rest. Whole rest occupies the same as a whole note. So that's 4 beats that you would be quiet. Is drawn with a box descending from the 4th line. So people get confused between the whole rest and the half rest because they look really similar. And there's ways to memorize that. Half rest looks like that. And like notes. Rests can have flags. So the 8th rest has a little flag next to it, and the 16th has 2 little flags. So this is a foreign language basically. There's all this vocabulary that you kind of have to just memorize, and then later on understand how it sounds. So it's very complicated, and especially if you don't play an instrument. If you're feeling overwhelmed, don't feel overwhelmed. Just let this stuff soak in, and at least you'll have an idea of that it even exists, and if someday you need to research it, you'll at least have some background knowledge or exposure. Although rare, rests can have 3 or 4 flags. That'd be a 16th rest, or excuse me, a 32nd rest and a 64th rest, which is very rare. All right, so that's the symbols for not making a sound. I'm going back to assignment 2, and now we have dots and ties. And this is where we can make notes last longer. And now, guys, this gets pretty abstract, and it's not as important for now, so I'm going to move a little bit quicker. So we have augmentation dots and tenuto dots that are 2 types of markings used to alter a note's duration. So in other words, there's just these other kinds of markings that change how long a note sounds. It'll make them longer. If we have a dot next to a note, we add another half of a beat to it. So whatever this quarter note is, we add half of it. So we know a quarter note is 2 eighth notes, so we're going to add another eighth note to it. And that's what that little dot tells you to do. And middle school kids will learn this and play it in their music quite a bit. And you know, you don't explain it to them like you would explain it to an adult. You know, in the piece of music, I would sing the part, and just, you know, when you see that, it sounds like this, and then I would show them that. We do a lot of exercises to make sure they got it, and then do it over and over and over again, and keep checking for understanding. As you can see, a dotted quarter note is equal to a quarter note plus an eighth note, so it lasts for 1.5 beats. Ta 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 ta. A dotted quarter note can also equal 3 eighth notes, because you can cut a quarter note in half. So it can also be 3 eighth notes long. It's exactly the same thing. So that symbol says that the note lasts for 1.5 beats. Now a tie emerges when you have multiple notes of the same pitch, that they just need to last longer. And you see them mostly over a bar line. And that has to do with the fact that this bar line is visually starting over the count. And so, but you can have a note will last over beat 1, and if it does, you put a tie like that instead of, well, it's the only way you can do it. And so that's called a tie, and it just makes the note last for another beat. And so they're used to let the duration of a note travel across barriers, such as the measure line in the example. So that would only be necessary when you're reading music. When you're listening to it, you're playing it not with, you know, by ear, you wouldn't be thinking, oh, this note has a tie. It's just a visual aid when you're reading the notes. So the 4th and 5th notes are now combined. So that'd be ta, 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 ta. That's what it would sound like. Ta, 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 ta. And if I get the piano out, that note is F. So it would sound, here's an F. So here's what it sounds like. Ta. That's what it would sound like. If that tie wasn't there, it would just be F, F, F. But with that tie there, I have to make those 2 red ones last longer. Tie, and then keep going. Okay? So if you see that, that's what it sounds like, or that's how it would be written if there was no bar line there. It sounds exactly the same. It's just written 2 different ways. Okay, and again, you know, you can always rewind this video if things aren't making sense. All right, and so that is a kind of a little lecture on the symbols of what pitches to play and when or how long to play them. And so now here comes the homework. I'm going to skip part 1 because these drills have more to do with what I just talked about. So I'll come back to part 1. All right, so these are our drills. So you're going to have to copy this if I can. Oh, okay. Oh, it looks like you can just click on it. Let me try that again. You can either copy and paste it or click it looks like. So, yeah. Okay, so this is actually, I set these exercises I set up. And so let me go back. So the directions say assignment drill. So here's what you do. How to submit your progress reports. Your progress grades will be displayed on the top of the page. You can reset your score anytime. Practice 30 exercises per category. So read these directions, and this will tell you how to do the assignment. I'm not going to read them out loud. But let me go to one of these drills. Okay, so note identification. This is the drill. And so I'm going to just kind of quickly go through this first one. So here's G. That's an A. There's another A. That is an F, and I know it's F because if I remember, I'm in my treble clef, and this line here is G. So if I go backwards, one below G is F, one more down is E. So that's my E. Okay, and then that's a B because it's 2 notes up from my ledger line G. F. I'm going to go through quickly so you can see what to do when this is done. G, D, C. Let's say I make a mistake. That's a C, but I'm going to do D. Oops, it's not C. All right, so let me go backwards. There's my ledger line G, then one down is F, then keep going backwards down the alphabet. There's an E, and then below that would be this space here, which would be D, and then one more down would be C. There's my, and I just write a line in it. It's always going to go line space, line space. So that note's C, and that note is E, and F. And if I go way up there, that's 2 ledger lines. So here's my G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And now for time's sake, I'm just going to kind of quickly go through it to get to the end of it. C, there's a D, G, and so I want to make sure I get 100% here. So I'm going to go until when I get to 30, and we'll see what my grade is. E, C, there's a B, and this just really helps lock it in. And the idea is that when you drill these over and over and over again, they become you just start memorizing. Oh, like I don't count up anymore. I just know. Oh, there's a D. It's always going to be a D for the rest of the time. There's C, there's an F, it'll always be F. And so you just start memorizing. It's kind of like typing, like the notes you see more often, the one you'll memorize quicker. And so I know that's the 5th line is F. There's a G. Okay, so I got to 33 and I have a 97. So I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to go over here. And I'm going to write show progress report. Sign report. I'll put my name, I guess. And copy link or copy code. And then I'm going to email it to me. Progress report. Okay, and then when I get it, I will open it up, click on it, and it'll show me your progress report. Your name and your grade, how long it took you. If I see that it took, well, everybody does really well on these. You can always start them over too. If it's like you have an F, let's say you're just totally destroyed and it doesn't make any sense, you can just close out and come back to it later and start over again. Whoops. And so, but anyway, that's what I would. Where's my progress report? There it is. So I look at this and then I put the grades in. So on the assignment, there are. Where are you? There are. Where are they? 4 different progress reports you're going to send in to me. So you're going to do this. Each one of these is set up. And so after 30 drills, let me make sure that's right. Yeah, 30 exercises per category. Whatever your grade is, then you can click on the dots and send me the progress report. Good. Okay, and then the other thing is the worksheets. In these worksheets, I'm going to have to go back to where, so you're going to download these worksheets, and then you're going to fill them out, and then you're going to submit them back to me. So take a picture of them, or PDF them, or scan them, whatever you got to do, just as long as I can grade them. So here's the first one, Grand Staff. And each one of these worksheets is really easy, actually. It's the kind where all the notes are, or all the answers up front. Here's your Grand Staff of all your bass clef, all your treble clef. So you can use this if you want as a cheat sheet, or if you really want to learn in this class, then try to figure the notes out on the drills by counting up and down and memorizing. If that's overwhelming for you, it's okay to use this as a resource, because when your eyes keep going back to the notes, you're going to memorize some of them also, and you know that you're right. So I don't really care. I just want you to go through the process whatever way is comfortable for you. So this just has you draw treble clefs and bass clefs, and then you figure out the note names, and their answers are right here. And so each worksheet's kind of like that. I just want you to go through the journey, get inside of the notation. And I would recommend doing the worksheets first and then do the drills, because you're going to get better at the notes by doing the worksheets first. So here's your answers for bass clef. So then just go through and answer all the questions and check your answers before you turn them in. Everybody should have 100% on these. Okay, and then there's one for treble clef. So you'll download that and answer all the questions. And it just keeps going. And then we have the staff. Recognizing which notes are higher or lower. This note sounds higher than this note. Draw a note on the indicated line or space, then circle the highest note you drew on the staff. So it says, draw a note on space 4, and then you'll draw a note on line 3. Follow these directions, but make sure that then you circle the highest note so you visually can see which note is the highest up, and the answer's up there. So just really read the directions thoroughly, and it shouldn't be too difficult. The answers are on the same sheet. So go through all these worksheets. Here's this one's where they have you just identify the notes, the note names. This is bass clef. Make sure that you pay attention to bass clef or treble clef, and they all form a word. So that's how you know you're right. Or you can go back to your grand staff and look them up. So definitely do the worksheets first, and then when you go to these drills, it'll be a lot easier. Okay, so that was a lot of information, and I want to end with, don't let this overwhelm you. I'm sure most of you will probably get 100% and feel like you didn't understand all of what I said, and that's because there's too much to understand if this is the first time you're hearing all of this. What's more important, sorry, I'm clicking around. What's more important is that you just get exposed to this and you get inside and just have an idea of what kids are going to learn through their years as an elementary and middle school music student. Okay, good luck with the assignment, and thanks for watching this video.